Hello and welcome again. So today we're going to be doing workbook lesson number 10. And workbook lesson number 10 is My Thoughts Do Not Mean Anything. I'm aware that this sounds very similar to some of the ideas we've already done, but to explain why it's important to do something similar but a little bit different, I'll give you an example that I remember hearing this quite a few years ago now. But this is Tony Robbins gave this example, and he was trying to learn how to do. I don't remember what martial art it was, but one of the martial arts, and he had some master teaching him it, and he wanted to learn it really quick because if you know Tony, Tony's kind of like go 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 kind of guy, and he wants to do things fast and he wants to make them happen as soon as possible, and he's a very driven person. Anyway, he tried to do it, and he tries to do it really fast, and he wanted to do it faster than everybody else. And he had him explaining he's doing these forms. So he's doing this form where his arm goes out or whatever out, and he's doing his sort of here, just so I have a little bit of something to work with here. When his arm goes out this direction, and he has to kind of make a certain movement to kind of simulate what he'd be doing once he's doing his actual form. And he's doing it, he's doing over and over again. He's kind of getting a little bit testy about it because he feels like he's doing the same thing. And he's like, goes to the teacher, and of course he's such a driven guy. He says, okay, enough is enough. I've done this lots. Can we move on to the next thing that we're going to do? And the master kind of quietly takes it and just says, but what we're doing today is the next move. And he didn't even notice the difference because he was too occupied with trying to do big things right away and trying to feel like in his ego that he was capturing, gaining something for himself. But what the master was saying is these subtle little differences are sometimes where the most important lessons are learned. Well, I don't know if that's what he was actually saying, but to him, the difference between a slight variation in the hand shape or whatever else is a very significant thing. And for us, when something is just tweaked, it shows you that the difference between one thing and the other thing is important. So when we say, my thoughts do not mean anything, of course, we're talking about what we've been talking about so far. So our thoughts do not mean anything. We're just perceiving a world of which we're projecting. So we've talked about this enough now. We can kind of remove ourselves from the situation, but we also have kind of obligation to each other. So this is great, and this is something I'll admit I'm not 100% sure about. I don't know how positive this situation is. I think it's super positive that somebody would do this, and I can see what they're able to accomplish, some of these yogis. But I feel like there's still things that need to be done interacting in the world with our brothers. So people that we interact with day to day, I feel like that still has to happen. So in that happening, we have to keep in mind that of course our thoughts about the situation don't mean much, but we have to, at the same time, the book talks about our atonement is being something kind of held out to us from our brothers in this world. So if we see their innocence, then we're reminded of our own. We'll realize that we're this without this thought of what we're projecting from ourselves. So maybe this is a good way too, and maybe this is just another way, but I think both are relevant. And I haven't talked about this enough yet, but we'll get to it in a moment here. So a good way to think about this is we try to construct the world based on what we expect and what we think is possible. So in a dream, we can have these fantastical situations like the one we're looking at here, and you don't really realize it's a dream while you're in it. Your consciousness will at least let go of what is typically used to, and it seems like it almost can block it out really, really well. As soon as you woke up, you know it's okay. It's not what it was. what it seemed like it was. But while you're in it, it seems like it's a world that always makes sense, or the world that is supportable based on the fact that you believe in it when you're in it. And this is really what we're talking about, right? So these thoughts about it are just kind of a condition of being in it, just like a dream. So they're a condition of what we think is possible at that moment. So obviously we know it's not true. As soon as we open our eyes, we'll laugh about it. And the book talks about that too. It's like waking up with this happy laughter of like, wow, I can't believe that was real. What we thought was real. So getting ahead of myself, but it's a notion that they mention a few times in the book. Okay, so you may notice I left a lot more here this time because I think all of this is really important. This is why I didn't really talk about it at the very beginning, and I am a little bit ranting today, but I think it's all going to be relevant, and I think it's all going to be on point once you understand where I'm going with it. So we still cut quite a bit, but we'll just talk about this as we go. So they are not your real thoughts. We have made a distinction before, and will do so again. You have no basis for comparison as yet. So we've forgotten the world that's real. So we believe in this world. Once we open our eyes, we'll remember. But until then, just like that dream we were talking about, we won't. When you do, you'll have no doubt that what you once believed were thoughts that did not mean anything. And we could be terrified of that giant gorilla, but in reality, we're under we're under really no actual threat. My thoughts instead of these thoughts in this case. So it's showing what we differentiate. So my thoughts instead of the thoughts that are coming to my mind. This is an important distinction. So this is that slight variation of the form, and no link is made overtly with the things around you. So we're not looking at something specifically. We're saying this more generalized and not really pointed towards a specific thing within the room. The emphasis is now on the lack of reality of what you think you think. The presence of these thoughts means that you are not thinking. Is merely another way of repeating our earlier statement that your mind is really blank. So, like they said before, it's this mental ping pong, and we're just kind of watching it go. And that's to keep us distracted from the reality that we know is true, but we're trying to not acknowledge at the moment because of a desire not to acknowledge it. To recognize this is to recognize nothingness when you see it. As such, is a prerequisite for vision. Close your eyes for the exercises and introduce them by repeating the idea quite slowly for yourself. Then add, so first of all, start with this, my thoughts do not mean anything. The idea will help release me from now all that I now believe. So think of yourself in that dream that we just looked at. So these thoughts about this dream do not mean anything. This idea will help release me from all that I now believe. So all the preconditions that make that dream seem like it's real are going to kind of fall away. The exercise consists as before in researching your mind for all the thoughts that are available to you without selection or judgment. Try to avoid classification of any kind. In fact, if you find it helpful to do so, you might imagine you are watching an oddly sorted procession going by. So if you want, you can kind of think of that as that first analogy that we gave of like with Plato in behind and the veil and what's going by on the altar is this procession of thoughts, is this like this film that is slowly being pressed by, and that's what your thoughts are like. It's just this movie that's being shot for you, and that's why your mind is blank. It's because you're just watching the movie and you think you're part of it, which has little if any personal meaning to you. As one crosses your mind, say, my thought about blank does not mean anything. My thought about blank does not mean anything. So this openness to whatever comes in as anything that can be relevant, it doesn't really matter. Again, it's my thoughts. These are your thoughts. What you think are your thoughts. They don't really mean anything. So whatever comes up, just repeat this. and end with, my thoughts do not mean anything. This idea will release me from all I now believe. So basically ending the same way you started, right? You kind of go in the same way and then you end out, and you just kind of identify the thoughts that come up during that time as whether they're not really going to be representing anything true. Okay, so today we have a couple more different times to do it. So 5 times of 1 minute, unless you're uncomfortable. And then they said you can do it as few as three to four. But try to do the 5 if you can. This is going to be hard. I would do it in a place, if I were you, that's not going to be too challenging. Don't try to do it while you're sitting at breakfast with your family or anything like that. It's obviously going to be very difficult at that point. Try to find a quiet time where you're not expected to talk to anybody on the bus or driving to work or whatever else. And I think that'd probably be the most suitable time if you have time by yourself. So that's what I recommend. But anyway, I apologize. Talked a little bit excessively today, but hope that it all helps, and we'll talk to you really soon. Okay?